Dr. Sarah Chen adjusted her laboratory coat as she walked through the pristine corridors of the Galactic research station orbiting Kepler 442b. The station buzzed with activity, as scientists from dozens of different species worked together on various xenobiology projects. Sarah had been here for 3 months now, studying human genetics alongside her alien colleagues, but she still felt like an outsider in many ways. The human delegation was small compared to the massive Zephyrian contingent that dominated the station. Zephyrians were tall, elegant beings with translucent blue skin and large, curious eyes that seemed to absorb everything around them. They were known throughout the galaxy for their scientific prowess and their insatiable hunger for knowledge about other species. As Sarah entered her assigned laboratory, she found Zix-9, her Zephyrian research partner, hunched over a microscope. Zix was different from the other Zephyrians Sarah had met. While most of them maintained a professional distance, Zix seemed genuinely fascinated by humans on a personal level. She asked questions that went beyond mere scientific curiosity, wanting to understand not just how humans functioned, but how they lived, felt, and experienced the world. Sarah. Zix looked up from her work, her large eyes brightening with excitement. I have been analyzing the human genetic samples you provided yesterday. The complexity is remarkable, but there is something I do not understand. Sarah set down her research tablet and moved closer to Zix's workstation. The two had developed an easy working relationship over the past few weeks, with Zix's endless questions helping Sarah see her own species from a completely new perspective. What's confusing you? Sarah asked, pulling up a chair beside her colleague. Zix's fingers danced across the holographic display, pulling up complex genetic sequences that rotated slowly in the air between them. These chromosomes here, she pointed to specific strands, they are clearly related to reproductive functions. But the mechanism is so different from anything I have studied before. Sarah nodded, recognizing the XY chromosome pair that Zix had highlighted. That's our sex determination system. Those chromosomes determine whether a human develops as male or female. Yes, I understand that part, Zix said, her voice taking on an excited tone. But what I find fascinating is what happens next. From what I can determine from these genetic markers, humans actually engage in physical contact during reproduction. Is this correct? The question caught Sarah slightly off guard. Among the Zephyrians, reproduction was a purely clinical process involving the exchange of genetic material through specialized organs without any physical intimacy. The concept of sexual reproduction as humans practiced it was completely foreign to them. Well, yes, Sarah replied, trying to keep her explanation scientific. Human reproduction involves physical bonding between partners. It's not just about creating offspring, though. The process serves multiple purposes in human society. Zix's eyes grew even wider if that was possible. Multiple purposes? What do you mean? Sarah found herself in the unusual position of explaining one of the most fundamental aspects of human nature to a being who had no frame of reference for it. For humans, the reproductive act is also about emotional bonding, pleasure, and relationship building. It's not just clinical like it is for your species. Pleasure? Zix repeated the word slowly as if testing how it felt. You mean humans actually enjoy the reproductive process? Most do, yes, Sarah said with a small smile. It's actually one of the most important ways humans form deep emotional connections with each other. Zix was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Sarah could practically see the gears turning in her colleague's mind as she tried to comprehend something so fundamentally different from her own experience. This is fascinating, Zix finally said. So when humans reproduce, they are not simply fulfilling a biological imperative to continue their species. They are also engaging in an act of emotional and physical bonding? Exactly, Sarah confirmed. And it's not even always about reproduction. Humans often engage in this bonding behavior simply for the emotional and physical benefits, without any intention of creating offspring. This revelation seemed to stun Zix into silence. She stared at the genetic sequences floating between them as if they might suddenly reveal all the secrets of human nature. But how? Zix asked eventually. How does physical contact create emotional bonds? This concept is completely foreign to my understanding. Sarah thought about how to explain something that, to humans, was as natural as breathing. It's partly biological. The physical contact releases hormones in our brains that create feelings of attachment and happiness, but it's also psychological and emotional. When humans choose to be vulnerable with each other in that way, it creates trust and intimacy. Zix reached out and gently touched Sarah's arm. Her cool, translucent skin a stark contrast to Sarah's warm flesh. Like this contact? Does this create bonding? Sarah felt a flutter of awkwardness but recognized that Zix's curiosity was purely scientific. Similar but much more intense. What you're doing now is friendly contact. Reproductive bonding involves much more extensive physical and emotional intimacy. I see, Zix said, though her expression suggested she didn't really see it all. And humans do this regularly? Not just when they wish to reproduce? Many humans who are in committed relationships do, yes. It's an important part of maintaining their emotional bond. Zix removed her hand from Sarah's arm and turned back to the genetic displays. This explains so much about human behavior that has puzzled me. The way you form pair bonds, the importance you place on emotional relationships, even the way human societies are structured around family units. Sarah watched as Zix began making notes on her research tablet, her movements quick and excited. You're really interested in this, aren't you? I am fascinated, Zix admitted. My species approaches relationships very differently. We have intellectual partnerships and cooperative bonds, but nothing like what you are describing. The idea that physical contact could create such deep emotional connections is remarkable. It's just one aspect of human nature, Sarah said, but it is pretty fundamental to how we function as a species. Zix looked up from her notes, her large eyes filled with something Sarah couldn't quite identify. Sarah, would it be possible for me to observe this behavior? To study it more directly? The question hung in the air between them, and Sarah realized that what had started as a simple scientific discussion was about to become much more complicated. Sarah stared at Zix for a long moment, trying to process what her colleague had just asked. The laboratory suddenly felt much smaller, and she could hear her own heartbeat in the silence that followed Zix's question. Observe, Sarah repeated carefully. What exactly do you mean by that? Zix seemed to realize that her question might have been misunderstood. Her translucent skin took on a slightly darker blue hue, which Sarah had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of blushing. I apologize if my question was inappropriate, Zix said quickly. I meant from a purely scientific perspective. Perhaps there are recordings or educational materials that could help me understand this aspect of human behavior better. Sarah felt a wave of relief mixed with something else she couldn't quite identify. There are educational resources, yes. But Zix, I have to ask why this particular aspect of human biology interests you so much. Your research focuses on genetic adaptation patterns. Zix set down her research tablet and turned to face Sarah fully. That is exactly why I am so curious. In all my studies of different species across the galaxy, I have never encountered anything like human reproductive bonding. Most species, including my own, view reproduction as a biological necessity, but humans have transformed it into something that affects your entire social structure, your art, your literature, even your decision-making processes. She gestured toward the holographic displays showing human genetic sequences. Look at these patterns. The human brain chemistry during bonding behavior produces combinations of neurochemicals that don't exist in any other species I have studied. Oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, all working together to create what you call emotional attachment. It is revolutionary. Sarah found herself impressed by Zix's analysis. Her colleague had clearly been thinking about this topic far more deeply than she had initially realized. You're right, Sarah said slowly. Human pair bonding does influence almost every aspect of our society. But Zix, what you're describing isn't just academic research anymore. You're talking about something very personal and intimate. But that is what makes it so fascinating, Zix insisted. Your species has taken a basic biological function and elevated it into something that transcends mere reproduction. You have created emotional and physical experiences that exist purely for the benefit of individual happiness and connection. How is that not worthy of scientific study? Sarah had to admit that when Zix put it that way, human sexuality did sound rather remarkable. She had never thought about it from the perspective of a species that experienced no physical pleasure or emotional bonding during reproduction. I suppose I could show you some educational materials, Sarah said hesitantly. There are scientific documentaries about human reproductive behavior and bonding patterns. Zix's eyes lit up with excitement. That would be wonderful. But I must admit I have already attempted to research this topic using the station's databases. And, Sarah prompted. and I found the information to be largely clinical and lacking in detail about the actual experience, Zix said. The materials focus heavily on the biological mechanics but say very little about the emotional and physical sensations that make this behavior so significant to humans. Sarah nodded, understanding the problem. Most scientific literature treats human sexuality from a purely reproductive standpoint. It doesn't really address the experiential aspects. Exactly, Zix said, which is why I hoped you might be able to provide more insight. You could help me understand not just what happens, but what it feels like and why it matters so much to your species. The request put Sarah in an awkward position. She was a scientist and she understood the value of Zix's research, but she was also being asked to discuss some of the most intimate aspects of human experience with a being who had no frame of reference for them. I can try to explain, Sarah said carefully, but you have to understand that this is deeply personal territory for humans. What you're asking about isn't just biology or behavior. It's about some of our most private and meaningful experiences. I understand, Zix said solemnly, and I appreciate your willingness to help. Perhaps you could start by explaining what makes the experience meaningful beyond reproduction. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. For humans, physical intimacy is a way of communicating emotions that don't have words. When two humans engage in reproductive behavior, they're sharing vulnerability, trust, and affection in a way that creates a unique bond between them. Vulnerability? Zix asked. Why would humans choose to be vulnerable during reproduction? That seems evolutionarily disadvantageous. That's exactly what makes it so powerful, Sarah explained. By choosing to be vulnerable with someone, we're demonstrating complete trust in them. It's a way of saying that we value our connection with them more than our own safety or protection. Zix made notes on her tablet, her expression thoughtful. So the act itself is less important than the emotional communication it represents? Both are important, Sarah said. The physical sensations are pleasurable, which reinforces the bonding behavior. But the emotional connection is what makes it meaningful rather than just instinctual. Pleasurable, Zix repeated as she had before. I am still struggling to understand this concept. For Zephyrians, reproduction is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. It is simply necessary. But you describe it as something humans actively seek for enjoyment. Absolutely, Sarah confirmed. The human nervous system is designed to make reproductive behavior one of the most pleasurable experiences we can have. It's nature's way of ensuring that we continue to engage in bonding behaviors that strengthen our social structures. Zix was quiet for a moment, processing this information. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more curious than clinical. Sarah, would it be too personal for me to ask if you have experienced this bonding behavior yourself? The question sent a flush of heat through Sarah's cheeks. She hadn't expected their scientific discussion to take such a personal turn. I have, she said simply, not offering details. And it was as you described? Pleasurable and emotionally meaningful? Sarah nodded, suddenly feeling very aware of the fact that she was sitting alone in a laboratory with an alien being who was asking her increasingly intimate questions about human sexuality. It was, she said quietly. Zix leaned forward slightly, her large eyes focused intently on Sarah's face. What I find most intriguing is that you seem to experience positive emotions when discussing these memories. Your facial expression, your body language, even your voice changes when you talk about meaningful bonding experiences. Sarah realized that Zix was right. Even thinking about past relationships and intimate moments did bring up positive feelings. That's part of how the bonding works. The memories themselves become sources of happiness and connection. Remarkable, Zix whispered. Your species has created a biological system that generates happiness through memory and connection. No wonder human relationships are so complex and important to your social structure. It's not just about the relationships, though, Sarah said, warming to the topic despite her initial discomfort. It's about the basic human need for connection and intimacy. Physical bonding fulfills something fundamental in our psychology. Zix set down her tablet and looked directly into Sarah's eyes. Sarah, I hope this question is not too forward, but would it be possible for me to experience something similar to this bonding behavior? I understand that as different species, we could not engage in actual reproductive behavior. But could I experience some form of the emotional and physical connection you describe? The laboratory fell silent except for the soft hum of the environmental systems. Sarah stared at Zix, realizing that what had started as a scientific discussion about human reproduction had just become something entirely different. Sarah felt her heart racing as Zix's question hung in the air between them. The implications of what her colleague was asking were staggering, both scientifically and personally. She studied Zix's face, trying to determine whether the Zephyrian truly understood what she was requesting. "Zix," Sarah said slowly, "I think we need to be very clear about what you're asking. When you say you want to experience human bonding behavior, what exactly do you mean?" Zix's translucent skin shifted to a deeper blue, but she maintained eye contact. "I have been thinking about this since our conversation began. As a scientist, I have studied hundreds of species, but I have never encountered anything like the emotional and physical bonding you describe. I cannot truly understand it from observation or theory alone." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "I realize that what I am asking is unusual, perhaps even inappropriate by human standards. But from a purely research perspective, direct experience is often the only way to fully comprehend a biological phenomenon." Sarah stood up from her chair and walked to the laboratory's large viewport, looking out at the swirling clouds of the planet below. She needed space to think clearly about what was happening. "Zix, what you're describing isn't just research anymore. Human bonding behavior involves deep emotional intimacy. Even if we could find a way for you to experience something similar, it would change our relationship fundamentally." "Would that be problematic?" Zix asked, her voice showing genuine curiosity rather than concern. Sarah turned back to face her colleague. "For humans, yes, it could be very complicated. Once we form intimate bonds with someone, it affects how we think about them, how we interact with them, even how we make decisions. It's not something we can just turn off when the research is complete." Zix rose from her own seat and approached the viewport where Sarah stood. "But what if that is exactly what makes it worthy of study? Your species has created a biological system that generates lasting emotional connections between individuals. For Zephyrians, relationships are intellectual partnerships that can be formed or dissolved based on practical considerations. What you describe sounds far more profound." "It is," Sarah admitted. "But that's also what makes it dangerous to experiment with. You're not just asking to observe human bonding behavior, Zix. You're asking to participate in it." "I understand the distinction," Zix said softly, "and I understand that it represents a significant risk. But Sarah, consider what we might learn, not just about human biology, but about the possibility of interspecies emotional connection. Has such a thing ever been attempted before?" The question gave Sarah pause. In all the centuries of galactic exploration and interspecies contact, she couldn't recall any documented cases of emotional bonding between species as different as humans and Zephyrians. The scientific implications were indeed staggering. "No," Sarah said eventually. "Nothing like this has ever been documented. Most species maintain strict boundaries when it comes to intimate behaviors." "Then we would be pioneers," Zix said, stepping closer to Sarah. "We could be the first to explore whether emotional bonding is purely a human phenomenon, or whether it represents something more universal that other species simply haven't discovered." Sarah found herself genuinely considering the proposal, despite all her reservations. The scientist in her was intrigued by the possibility of groundbreaking research, but the human in her was terrified of the emotional complications that could arise. "Even if I agreed to this," Sarah said, "I'm not sure how it would work. Human bonding involves physical sensations and chemical responses that your nervous system might not be capable of experiencing." Zix reached out and gently touched Sarah's arm again, as she had done earlier. But this time Sarah noticed something different. Where before the contact had been brief and casual, now Zix's fingers lingered, tracing small patterns on Sarah's skin. "Your nervous system responds to touch," Zix observed. "I can see changes in your skin temperature and muscle tension. My nervous system is different, but it is not unresponsive to physical stimulation." Sarah looked down at Zix's hand on her arm. The Zephyrian's skin was cool and slightly textured, unlike anything she had experienced before. But the contact wasn't unpleasant. If anything, there was something intriguing about the alien touch. Physical response is just one component, Sarah said, though she made no move to pull away from Zix's touch. Human bonding also involves emotional vulnerability, trust, and psychological intimacy. Are you prepared for those aspects? I believe so, Zix said. Over the past weeks of working together, I have developed what I think you might call emotional attachment to you, Sarah. I value our partnership, I enjoy our conversations, and I find myself thinking about you when we are not together. Is that not a form of emotional bonding already? The admission surprised Sarah. She had been so focused on the scientific aspects of their discussion that she hadn't considered whether Zix might already be experiencing something like emotional attachment. That is a form of bonding, Sarah agreed. But what you're describing now goes much deeper than professional partnership or friendship. I know, Zix said simply. And that is precisely why I am asking. I want to understand what lies beyond the connections I already understand. I want to experience the deeper bonding that defines human relationships. Sarah looked into Zix's large, expressive eyes and saw something she hadn't expected. Beneath the scientific curiosity was something that looked very much like longing. Not just intellectual desire to understand human behavior, but genuine emotional yearning to experience it herself. You're not just curious about this academically, are you? Sarah asked quietly. You actually want to experience human-style bonding for yourself. Zix's skin shifted to an even deeper blue, but she didn't deny Sarah's observation. Perhaps my motivations are not as purely scientific as I initially claimed. Working with you, learning about human emotional complexity, has made me realize that my own species might be missing something important, something that could make our lives richer and more meaningful. And you think I could help you experience that? I think we could explore it together, Zix corrected. As equals, as partners in both research and experience. I am not asking you to simply demonstrate human behavior for my benefit. I am asking if we could create something new together, something that belongs to both our species. The proposal was unlike anything Sarah had ever considered. The idea of forming an intimate bond with an alien being challenged every assumption she had about relationships and human nature, but it also represented an opportunity for discovery that might never come again. This would have to be approached very carefully, Sarah said slowly. If we're going to explore interspecies bonding, we need to establish clear boundaries and communication protocols. We need to understand what each of us hopes to gain and what we're willing to risk. Zix's eyes brightened with excitement and something that looked remarkably like hope. You are willing to consider it? Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her answer would change everything between them. I'm willing to explore the possibility. But Zix, if we do this, there's no going back to the way things were before. Are you prepared for that? I am, Zix said without hesitation. The question is, are you? Sarah looked out at the alien world, spinning slowly below them, then back at the remarkable being standing beside her. She was about to embark on the most unusual research project of her career, and possibly the most significant relationship of her life. Yes, she said quietly. I think I am. Over the following weeks, Sarah and Zix approached their unusual research with the same methodical care they brought to their regular scientific work. They established protocols, documented their observations, and proceeded with careful deliberation. What they were exploring had no precedent in galactic history, and both understood the significance of their work. Their first sessions focused on understanding the fundamental differences between human and Zephyrian nervous systems. Using advanced bioscanning equipment, they mapped how each species responded to various types of physical contact. The results were fascinating and encouraging. Your nervous system is far more complex than I initially realized, Sarah observed as she studied the scans of Zix's neural activity during a simple hand-holding exercise. You have neural pathways that respond to touch in ways that are remarkably similar to human responses. Zix examined her own readings with scientific interest. And your emotional centers are more active than any species I have studied. Even during minor physical contact, your brain chemistry shows significant changes. They progressed slowly, building trust and understanding with each session. What began as clinical observation gradually evolved into something more personal and meaningful. Sarah found herself looking forward to their research sessions with an anticipation that had nothing to do with scientific discovery. "I am beginning to understand what you meant about emotional vulnerability," Zix said during one of their evening sessions. They had moved their research to Sarah's private quarters to avoid curious colleagues, and the more intimate setting had allowed for deeper exploration. "How so?" Sarah asked. She was lying beside Zix on her narrow station bed, both of them clothed but closer than they had ever been before. "When I allow you to touch me, when I lower my defenses and trust you completely, I experience something I have never felt before," Zix explained. "It is not just physical sensation, though that is remarkably pleasant. It is a sense of connection that seems to reach into my consciousness itself." Sarah smiled, understanding exactly what Zix meant. "That's the emotional bonding I was trying to describe. It's not just about touch or physical pleasure. It's about the psychological connection that forms when you make yourself vulnerable to another being." Zix turned to face Sarah, her large eyes reflecting the soft lighting in the quarters. "I never imagined that vulnerability could be a source of strength rather than weakness. In Zephyrian culture, we maintain emotional barriers to protect ourselves. But with you, lowering those barriers makes me feel more complete, not more exposed." "That's because vulnerability shared becomes intimacy," Sarah said, reaching out to gently stroke the smooth skin of Zix's face. "When both partners choose to be open and vulnerable together, it creates a bond that's stronger than either could achieve alone." Zix leaned into Sarah's touch, her own hand moving to rest over Sarah's heart. "Your cardiovascular system increases its activity when we are close like this. Is that part of the bonding response?" "Among other things," Sarah confirmed. "Humans experience a whole cascade of physical and emotional responses during intimate contact. Increased heart rate, hormone release, heightened sensitivity, it all combines to create an experience that's both intensely physical and deeply emotional." "I think I am beginning to experience something similar," Zix said quietly. "My neural activity intensifies when you touch me. My awareness becomes more focused, more present, and I find myself wanting the experience to continue." Sarah felt a warm rush of affection for her alien partner. Over the weeks of their research, Zix had shown remarkable openness and courage in exploring concepts that were completely foreign to her species. Watching her discover emotional intimacy had been one of the most rewarding experiences of Sarah's life. "Zix," Sarah said softly, "what we're doing here, it's become more than research for me. I hope you know that." Zix's skin took on a warm golden hue that Sarah had learned indicated contentment and happiness. "For me as well. When I first asked to experience human bonding behavior, I thought I was pursuing scientific knowledge, but what I have found with you is something far more valuable." "What's that?" "Connection," Zix said simply. "Not just the intellectual partnership I'm accustomed to, but genuine emotional attachment. I find myself caring about your happiness, your well-being, your thoughts and feelings." "Is this what humans call love?" The question caught Sarah off guard. They had been exploring physical intimacy and emotional bonding, but neither had explicitly discussed the deeper feelings that had been developing between them. "It might be," Sarah said carefully. "Love means different things to different humans, but what you're describing sounds like the foundation of it. Caring about another being's happiness, wanting to share experiences with them, feeling emotionally connected to their well-being. Then I believe I am falling in love with you," Zix said with characteristic directness. "And I find that both exciting and terrifying." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. She had been trying to maintain some professional distance from their research, but Zix's honest admission broke down her remaining barriers. "I'm falling in love with you too," Sarah confessed. "And you're right, it is terrifying. We're crossing boundaries that have never been crossed before. No one knows what happens when a human and a Zephyrian form this kind of bond." Zix moved closer until they were sharing the same breath. "Perhaps that is what makes it so remarkable. We are creating something entirely new, something that belongs only to us." Sarah looked into Zix's alien features and saw not something foreign and strange, but someone she had come to care about deeply. Their physical differences seemed irrelevant compared to the emotional connection they had built. "The other humans on the station, they don't know about our research," Sarah said. "How do you think they would react if they knew?" "I suspect some would be curious, others concerned," Zix replied. "But Sarah, does their opinion matter? What we have discovered together, what we continue to explore, It has value regardless of what others might think. You're right, Sarah agreed. But we should probably consider going public with our findings eventually. What we've learned about interspecies bonding could change how different civilizations interact with each other. Zix smiled, an expression she had learned from watching Sarah. So we are not just lovers exploring new territory. We are scientists making discoveries that could benefit the entire galaxy. We're both, Sarah said, leaning in to place a gentle kiss on Zix's lips. The sensation was different from kissing another human, but no less meaningful. We're partners in every sense of the word. As they held each other in the quiet of Sarah's quarters, both understood that they had accomplished something unprecedented. They had proven that emotional bonding was not limited to within species, but could transcend biological differences to create connections based on understanding, trust, and genuine affection. Their research had become their relationship, and their relationship had become something beautiful and unique in the galaxy. They were pioneers not just of science but of love itself, proving that the human capacity for connection was truly universal. Tomorrow I want to document our neural synchronization patterns during close contact, Zix said, her voice taking on the excited tone she used when discussing particularly interesting research. Sarah laughed softly. Even now you're thinking like a scientist. Of course, Zix replied with mock seriousness. The best research is always a combination of rigorous methodology and passionate interest in the subject matter. Is that what this is? Passionate interest? Zix's response was to pull Sarah closer, demonstrating without words exactly how passionate her interest had become. 3 months into their relationship, Sarah and Zix had documented remarkable discoveries about interspecies bonding that went far beyond their initial research goals. Their private quarters had been converted into an advanced laboratory where they could monitor their own biological responses during intimate contact, creating the most comprehensive study of cross-species emotional attachment in galactic history. The neural synchronization is extraordinary, Zix said, reviewing their latest brain scan data while lying in Sarah's arms. During our most intimate moments, our brainwave patterns actually begin to mirror each other despite our completely different neurological structures. Sarah looked at the holographic displays showing their synchronized neural activity. It's like our minds are finding a common frequency to operate on, neither fully human nor fully Zephyrian, but something new that incorporates both. This has profound implications, Zix continued, her scientific excitement evident even in their intimate setting. If two species as different as ours can achieve this level of neural harmony, it suggests that emotional bonding might be a fundamental force in the universe, not just a quirk of human biology. Their groundbreaking research had not gone unnoticed. Dr. Vex 12, the Zephyrian lead scientist on the station, had begun asking pointed questions about their extended collaboration. Similarly, Dr. Marcus Webb, the human expedition leader, had expressed curiosity about their secretive work sessions. We're going to have to tell them soon, Sarah said, running her fingers through what passed for hair on Zix's scalp. Our colleagues are starting to notice that we're spending every off-duty hour together. I know, Zix replied, but I am concerned about how the scientific community will receive our findings. What we have discovered challenges fundamental assumptions about species barriers and emotional compatibility. That's exactly why it's important to share it, Sarah argued. Think about what this could mean for galactic society. If different species can form genuine emotional bonds, it could revolutionize interspecies cooperation, diplomacy, even exploration. Zix was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. You are right, of course, but Sarah, I must admit that part of me wants to keep this discovery private. What we have created together feels too precious to expose to scrutiny and debate. Sarah understood Zix's reluctance. Their relationship had grown far beyond the boundaries of scientific research into something deeply personal and meaningful. The idea of having their most intimate experiences analyzed by committees and peer review boards was uncomfortable. We don't have to share everything, Sarah said gently. We can publish the scientific findings without exposing the personal details. The important discovery is that interspecies bonding is possible, not necessarily the specifics of how we achieved it. Before Zix could respond, both their communication devices chimed simultaneously. Sarah reached for her tablet, expecting routine station updates, but instead found an urgent message from Dr. Webb requesting an immediate meeting in his office. Zix received the same message, Sarah noted, looking at her partner's device. They know, Zix said simply. An hour later, they found themselves seated across from Dr. Webb and Dr. Vex 12 in the station commander's conference room. Both senior scientists wore expressions of professional concern mixed with curiosity. Dr. Chen, Dr. Zix 9, Dr. Webb began formally. We've asked you here because we've become aware of some unusual research activities that weren't included in your original project proposals. Dr. Vex 12 leaned forward, her large eyes focused intently on Zix. Our monitoring systems have detected irregularities in your laboratory usage patterns, extended off-duty collaborations, and some rather interesting bioscan data from your quarters. Sarah felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She had known this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared for the clinical way their superiors were discussing their private activities. Before you respond, Dr. Webb continued, I want you to know that neither Dr. Vex 12 nor I are here to judge your personal choices. However, as expedition leaders, we need to understand what kind of research you've been conducting and whether it has implications for station operations. Zix straightened in her chair, adopting the confident posture Sarah had learned to recognize when her partner was about to make a bold scientific presentation. Dr. Vex 12, Dr. Webb, Zix began, what Dr. Chen and I have discovered represents the most significant breakthrough in interspecies relations in galactic history. We have successfully documented and experienced genuine emotional bonding between human and Zephyrian subjects. The silence in the room was profound. Both senior scientists stared at Zix as if she had announced the discovery of a new form of physics. Emotional bonding? Dr. Vex 12 repeated slowly. You mean you have been studying human reproductive behavior patterns? We began by studying human bonding behaviors, Sarah interjected, finding her voice. But what we discovered goes far beyond reproduction. We've documented the formation of genuine emotional attachment, neural synchronization, and psychological intimacy between our two species. Dr. Webb leaned back in his chair, processing this information. And this research involved personal participation, rather than observation? Yes, Zix said without hesitation. Direct experience was the only way to truly understand the phenomenon. We followed strict research protocols and documented every stage of our findings. Show us, Dr. Vex 12 said simply. For the next hour, Sarah and Zix presented their accumulated data. Brain scans showing neural synchronization, chemical analysis revealing hormone responses in both species, psychological evaluations documenting emotional development, and detailed observations of their bonding progression. Dr. Webb studied the neural synchronization patterns with growing amazement. This is incredible. You've achieved brainwave harmony despite having completely different neurological structures. The implications for communication technology alone are staggering. But the real discovery is emotional, Zix emphasized. We have proven that the capacity for deep emotional connection transcends species boundaries. What humans call love is not unique to their biology, but represents something more universal. Dr. Vex 12 was examining the chemical analysis data. These hormone cascades in the Zephyrian subject are unlike anything in our medical literature. You've documented the emergence of entirely new biochemical processes. The question is, Dr. Webb said, looking directly at both researchers, what happens now? This discovery could revolutionize galactic society, but it also challenges some fundamental assumptions about species separation and cultural boundaries. Sarah and Zix exchanged glances. They had anticipated this question but hadn't reached a final decision about how to proceed. We believe this research should be shared with the broader scientific community, Sarah said. But we also think it should be done carefully, with full consideration of the social and political implications. Agreed, Dr. Vex 12 said. But there's another question that needs addressing. Dr. Zix 9, Dr. Chen, are you planning to continue this relationship beyond the research phase? The question hung in the air between them. Sarah looked at Zix, seeing in her partner's eyes the same certainty she felt in her own heart. Yes, they said simultaneously, then smiled at their synchronization. This isn't just research for us anymore, Sarah continued. What started as scientific inquiry has become a genuine relationship. We've formed an emotional bond that we both value beyond its research significance. Dr. Webb nodded thoughtfully. Then we're not just dealing with a scientific discovery. We're dealing with the first documented case of interspecies romantic partnership in galactic history. The political implications will be significant, Dr. Wu, Vex 12 observed. Some civilizations maintain strict species purity doctrines. Others may see this as an opportunity for enhanced cooperation. The reactions will be mixed, which is exactly why we need to present our findings carefully, Zik said. We should focus initially on the scientific discoveries and their potential benefits for interspecies cooperation. The personal relationship aspect can be addressed later, once the scientific community has accepted the basic findings. Dr. Webb stood up, signaling the end of their meeting. I'm going to recommend that you both prepare a formal presentation for the next Galactic Scientific Conference. This discovery deserves the widest possible audience. And in the meantime? Sarah asked. In the meantime, you continue your work, Dr. Vex 12 said with what Sarah had learned to recognize as a Zephyrian smile. Both your research and your relationship. You've opened a door that can never be closed again, and the galaxy will be better for it. As they left the conference room, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. Their secret was out, but instead of disapproval, they had found support and recognition of their work's importance. Ready to change the galaxy? Zix asked, taking Sarah's hand as they walked down the corridor. With you? I'm ready for anything, Sarah replied, realizing that their greatest discovery still lay ahead of them. 6 months later, Sarah stood before the largest gathering of scientists in galactic history. The Galactic Scientific Conference had drawn representatives from over 200 species, all eager to hear about the groundbreaking research that had been generating excitement and controversy across known space. Beside her, Zix radiated calm confidence despite the magnitude of their audience. Their presentation had been refined through countless practice sessions, but Sarah knew that no amount of preparation could fully prepare them for the reaction they were about to receive. Honored colleagues, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast auditorium. Today we present findings that challenge our fundamental understanding of interspecies interaction and emotional capability. The audience was already completely silent, hanging on every word. News of their research had spread through the scientific community like wildfire, generating intense debate about its implications. Zix stepped forward, activating the holographic displays that would illustrate their findings. For centuries, galactic civilization has operated under the assumption that meaningful emotional bonds could only form between members of the same species. Today we present evidence that this assumption is incorrect. The first display showed their initial brain scan data, demonstrating the neural synchronization they had achieved despite their different neurological structures. A murmur of excitement rippled through the audience. What you are seeing, Sarah explained, is the real-time brain activity of two researchers from different species achieving emotional and psychological harmony. This synchronization was not achieved through technological intervention, but through natural biological processes activated by emotional bonding. Dr. Keth Seven, a prominent Andromedan scientist, raised a tentacle from the audience. Dr. Chen, are you claiming that the emotional bonding behavior specific to humans can be replicated by other species? We're claiming something more significant, Zix responded. We believe that the capacity for deep emotional bonding is not unique to humans, but represents a fundamental aspect of consciousness that has been largely underdeveloped in most species. The presentation continued with detailed analysis of their hormone studies, psychological evaluations, and behavioral observations. Each piece of data supported their central thesis that interspecies emotional bonding was not only possible but potentially transformative for galactic society. The implications extend far beyond individual relationships, Sarah explained as they reached the conclusion of their formal presentation. If different species can form genuine emotional bonds, it opens possibilities for cooperation, understanding, and unity that we have never before considered. When they finished, the auditorium erupted in discussion. Scientists from dozens of species engaged in animated debates about the research methodology, the implications of the findings, and the potential applications of their discoveries. Dr. Vorthak, the elderly crystalline delegate who served as conference moderator, called for order. Drs. Chen and Zix9, your research raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness and emotional capability. However, many of our colleagues will want to know about the personal aspects of your research. Were you able to maintain scientific objectivity while participating in the bonding behaviors you studied? The question they had been expecting finally came. Sarah and Zix had agreed beforehand to be completely honest about this aspect of their work. Dr. Vorthak, Zix replied, we believe that objectivity and personal involvement are not mutually exclusive in this context. The emotional bonds we formed during our research have enhanced rather than compromised our understanding of the phenomena we studied. John, are you saying that you and Dr. Chen formed a romantic relationship during your research? Pressed Dr. Kalane, a Rigelian xenobiologist known for her direct questioning style. Sarah stepped forward. We are saying that our research led to the formation of a deep emotional bond that continues to this day. This bond has provided us with ongoing opportunities to study interspecies attachment and its effects on both individuals and their broader communities. The revelation sent another wave of discussion through the audience. Some species delegations appeared excited by the possibilities, while others seemed concerned about the implications for their own cultural practices. The personal relationship that developed during our research is not separate from our scientific findings, Zix added. It is the living proof of our hypothesis. We have demonstrated that emotional bonding between different species is not only possible, but can be as meaningful and significant as any same-species relationship. Dr. Yenth Prime, representing the Galactic Ethics Council, stood to address them directly. Dr. Zix9, Dr. Chen, while your research is undoubtedly fascinating, some concern has been raised about the ethical implications of your methodology. Should interspecies intimate research be subject to different ethical standards? An excellent question, Sarah acknowledged. We believe that any research involving intimate behavior between sentient beings should be subject to the highest ethical standards, regardless of species. Our research was conducted with full informed consent, careful documentation, and ongoing ethical review. Moreover, Zix added, we would argue that our findings have significant ethical implications for how different species interact with each other. If we can form genuine emotional bonds, then we have moral obligations toward each other that extend beyond simple diplomatic courtesy. The questions continued for another hour, covering everything from research methodology to philosophical implications to potential applications. Through it all, Sarah and Zix presented a united front, supporting each other's responses and demonstrating the very bond they had discovered. As the formal session concluded, they were surrounded by colleagues eager to discuss their work in more detail. Some expressed fascination with the scientific possibilities, others shared concerns about social implications, and a few admitted they were considering similar research with their own interspecies partnerships. Dr. Chen, Dr. Zix9, called Dr. Miriam Torres, a human psychologist who had been following their work closely. What advice would you give to other researchers interested in exploring interspecies emotional bonding? Sarah and Zix exchanged the kind of look that had become second nature to them, communicating volumes without words. Proceed carefully but courageously, Sarah said. This kind of research requires tremendous trust, both in your research partner and in yourself. But the discoveries you can make together are worth the risks. And remember, Zix added, that you are not just researchers exploring a phenomenon. You are pioneers creating entirely new forms of connection and understanding. The responsibility is significant, but so is the potential reward. As the conference day ended, Sarah and Zix found themselves alone in their temporary quarters, reflecting on the day's events. Do you think we've started something that will change the galaxy? Sarah asked, leaning against Zix in the comfortable intimacy they had developed. I think we've proven that change is possible, Zix replied. Whether others choose to pursue it will depend on their courage and curiosity. Any regrets about going public with our research? Zix turned to look directly into Sarah's eyes. None whatsoever. What we discovered together is too important to keep secret, and what we built together is too strong to be diminished by public scrutiny. Sarah smiled, pulling Zix closer. So what's our next research project? I was thinking we could explore the long-term effects of interspecies bonding on individual psychology and social integration, Zix said with mock seriousness. It could take decades of careful study. Decades. Sarah laughed. Well, fortunately, I have the perfect research partner for such an extended project. As they held each other in the quiet of their quarters, both understood that their work was just beginning. They had opened a door to new possibilities for connection and understanding throughout the galaxy. Their love story had become a scientific revolution, and their scientific revolution had become a love story that would inspire generations of researchers, dreamers, and lovers across the stars. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would they. But together, they were ready for whatever discoveries lay ahead.